All right, so I'm here to talk about All-Star Points. As controversial as this has been for the past couple weeks, I was just kind of waiting to see what the end result was going to be with all these polls and try to see the end result for how the All-Star Point system was going to end up working out. For those who are unaware, basically Warcraft Logs has decided to implement weighted DPS in some variable fashion. Maybe actually not weighted DPS. I don't think that's the correct term. But they're removing the damage done to some specific mobs that are a core function of the fight's design in order to, I don't know. I think it's to reduce padding, or to reduce the propensity of padding in terms of how people would gain All-Star points and stuff like that. I think that is fundamentally the reason that this has occurred. And I decided that I wanted to make a video talking about why I thought that this was stupid. Alright, so first and foremost, let's actually take a look at the Warcraft Logs Twitter. Some poll results here. With some votes, people have voted in the favor to remove Psychus bonus damage on N'Zoth, filtering only to people who have killed it on Mythic. That number jumped to 61.88%, favoring the removal. Result, Psychus bonus damage will stay removed from ranks on Mythic. Basically meaning that all of the damage that you do to Psychus is normalized. Which, I guess I'm okay-ish with. However, something that I think is actually incredibly stupid is whenever fights get removed from All-Star Points rankings in general, such as this one on Hivemind. Drone damage will be included once more on Hivemind, and Hivemind will be removed from DPS All-Stars. See this forum post for poll results and details. Alright, let's talk about that for a little bit. So, you know what? I could give them a pass for Skitra. Prophet Skitra is a fundamentally broken fight where people go into multiple phases, and there's no great way of being able to combat log and track accurate damage, accurate DPS done across the whole entire raid. So disabling All-Star Points for that fight makes the most sense. The only way that you could gain All-Star Points realistically would be to be logging Skitra for yourself, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm going to talk about why I have a problem with stuff like drone damage being removed, and like Hivemind being removed fundamentally, and antigen and cyst damage, and damage is absorbed by the synthesis on Carapace and N'Zoth also being removed. All of those, I would say, are fairly problematic for your boy. And the reason for that is I believe that fights and All-Star Points in general are very arbitrary. Not the fights themselves, but All-Star Points in general are very arbitrary in terms of they're not a great way of ranking players versus other players. Some fights, sure, they can show relative performance, right? So say single target patchwork fights like Shadhar, Mout, even those fights have enough where they have enough stuff not going on to where they can give you just a general indication of single target damage and single target performance. All-Star Points, however, are very arbitrary, especially once you start adding in other targets. Once you also start adding in targets like Psychus that are taking increased damage, then it just becomes oh shit, who can pad the most? Which I understand why that would be seen as a problem for most, but All-Star Points are this fun end of expansion thing that people are in logs or things that people are trying to go for to be able to, I don't know, just kind of blast DPS. So this is where I start the argument. Is sure, you can have weighted DPS metrics on Warcraft Logs. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. And weighted DPS metrics can remove drone damage, and it can remove cyst damage. That makes a lot of sense. It can do Psychus in a way where it's all of the damage into Psychus, and the cysts are normalized as if Psychus had 0 stacks of his buff. Also, you know what? That makes sense for a weighted damage metric, or a new damage metric. However, once it starts impeding All-Star Points, it really doesn't make any sense, and that removes the fun and the flavor from All-Star Points. And that's why I think that All-Star Points should be left mostly unchanged, just in general, because once you start tinkering with things, where does it really stop? And that's what I'm showing you. It's so where does it really stop? I know in Classic they've been having major problems with world buffs, and is time in the raid instance the most important metric? And it's all of those things have become problems. But now for retail, they started removing Hivemind drone damage. Hivemind completely is removed from All-Star Points, and the antigen and cyst damage. So okay, let's say the drones got put back onto Hive Mind, but Hive Mind got fully removed from All-Star Points. The drones were a fundamental part of how Rathian worked, or how Hive Mind worked. Like the drone damage, people like you had certain people allocated to run Essence of the Focusing Iris, the Azurite Beam, on progression to be able to deal with the drones. Then you had other people making sure that they focus down the darters and doing single target damage to focus down the darters. And that's just like a fundamental design of how the fight works. Some people get to pad, and some people get to do single target damage or priority damage. And that's totally fine. That's how the fight's always going to be. Antigen and Cis damage, I assume that this is going to, this is trying to stop people from running absolute corruption on warlocks and just dotting up the antigens and cysts to be able to quote pad logs. But dude, if you're doing that to go for all-star points or go for ranks anyways, like what's the point in trying to stop it? Like at what point is there a breaking point? And logs are like this fun thing that you're going for to be able to just kind of like blast DPS. But whenever so part of the problem with the antigen and cyst damage being removed is like you have major damage cooldowns allocated to the synthesis growths that are on the wall. And like, so say you have your mage combusting into those synthesis growths, they're just losing a lot of their damage. And at the point in which it becomes you no longer want to cool down into the synthesis growths, which is a primary core function of the fight, that becomes a major dilemma with how All-Star Points functions, because then you have people who are going to be self-sabotaging in order to get ranks. And it's like, at that point, it's like, what's the difference between just leaving it as it currently is? Because you're already impacting how people are going to play the fight by a significant margin. I just don't understand why you would even change something like that. Once there becomes a major disparity like that, I believe that there becomes a fundamental problem with how the fights are done. And that's really where I draw the line with All-Star Points. All-Star Points should be left independent of one another, throughout the whole entire patch, and they should just be left alone. And if you want to create a separate weighted damage metric or an ethical parsing metric, by all means, go ahead. And All-Star Points are not used to be able to judge relative player performance, unfortunately. There's a lot more that goes into player performance beyond All-Star Points, and any good guild would know that, and any good player would understand that. So making sure that you have the knowledge and the background required to be able to look through logs and look and see how good players are relative to one another is very important. But dude, the fact that there's been this crusade against All-Star Points lately, and it's like they're constantly being changed from something that shouldn't be changed I don't understand it. And I hope that for the next patch and for the beginning of Shadowlands, for the castle raid, it gets left mostly unchanged. Obviously, again, like I said, just circling back, I think something like Skitra, where Skitra is just a fundamentally broken fight and can never be truly balanced, makes a lot of sense, right? It'll never be able to pop up on All-Star Points. And you know what? I will say that even for something like what was that fight in Nighthold where you had that fell guy who actually just the damage to him didn't matter. It was the boss that walked around in the courtyard. Stuff like that where damage to a secondary target is literally a 0 damage gain on the fight. I can kind of get behind that. But whenever you start removing All-Star Points, currently, All-Star Points are disabled for Hive Mind, Prophet Skitra, and Drestagath. All-Star Points are also heavily limited on stuff like N'Zoth and Carapace. I think it's also limited on Il'gynoth, because whenever the dudes heal, the damage that is done to them is also... I think it maybe actually doesn't show. Actually, no, that's not true. The damage to them shows up. But it's it gets to the point where it's where do you draw the line? So Drestagath, I assume Drestagath is removed because the best way to parse on Drestagath is hitting... sometimes you would rather just hit the immune boss, and sometimes you would hit just the add with the damage buff, but I think the problem is hitting the immune boss is seen as padding in some form or fashion. So I don't know, man. I think that this is a major fundamental problem with how All-Star Points works, and I think that they should just be left alone. Right now you can see on screen, only damage done to Drestagath with the Voice Infused Anchored debuff is present in counts on the table below. Tanks are excluded from this restriction. Tanks being excluded from this restriction makes a lot of sense. Dude, there are times where you actually just kind of burn Drestagath through his shield or his healing, and say you don't have the buff. Okay, what the hell? Are you just gonna not hit the boss because it's not a damage gain? Or are you just gonna hit the ad while your group is called commit to the boss. No, you're gonna hit the fucking boss like a normal person. So I think that fundamentally just the tinkering with All-Star Points as a whole is fairly problematic and should be left alone. And that's my opinion on the matter, and I hope to hear you guys' opinion down in the comment section. I hope to hear why I'm stupid and why that All-Star Point should be heavily moderated by Kihra, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.